Blackwood Forest taught one rule fast. Trust only the red trail markers, because the wrong color doesn't bring a person back the same. At 3:14 a.m., Tuesday, my headlamp hit a blue rectangle nailed to a cedar, and the paint smell punched through the cold like somebody had sprayed it seconds ago. The probation letter in my pocket said one more missed patrol, and my badge would auto-lock at sunrise, so turning around wasn't just pride. It was my job. A blue marker means someone expects a body. Boots crunched over frozen needles, and the crunch felt too loud because the usual night noises had thinned out. Anyone who has walked a patrol alone knows the forest never goes quiet for free. The little details keep a person sane out here. The way the radio squelches when it's scanning. The way the trailhead gate clicks twice when it catches. The way I always double tap my chest pocket to make sure the permit is still there. That permit was stamped 12B in fading ink, and it sat warm against my ribs, wrapped around the metal urn like it could make grief legal. My father wanted his ashes scattered at the overlook, the one spot he used to call the only place that didn't talk back. The district approved it, but the approval came with a shift assignment attached, because the district loves turning a favor into a metric. The laminated card I'd been issued for this patrol had a coffee ring dried into the corner and a peeling edge that kept snagging my glove. A tiny revision code was printed along the bottom in gray toner, the kind of thing nobody reads unless they're the kind of person who gets graded on compliance. The card said in thin block letters, "If you see a blue marker, you stop where you are, you radio dispatch. You do not continue." A second line sat under it, underlined so hard the plastic was scarred. Blue trails do not return. The blue marker wasn't on any map. It wasn't on the signage. It wasn't in the binder. The red markers were supposed to be the only ones, and the red markers were supposed to be boring. My glove hovered over the blue paint anyway, because the part of my brain that still believed in rules wanted proof that it was real. The smell of solvent got stronger when I leaned in, and the air felt gritty like it carried ground glass. The radio on my shoulder clicked once, then twice, and then a voice came through using my call sign in the same flat tone it always did when the district office wanted something done without discussion. "Patrol unit, confirm you've reached the reroute." That wasn't dispatch. Dispatch didn't call it a reroute unless someone had signed off, and nobody signed off without paperwork. My thumb rested on the transmit button. The simple thing would have been to answer, to pretend the blue marker belonged here, to let the system breathe easy and let me make it to my 7 a.m. review with clean hands. The urn thumped once against my chest, like something inside shifted its weight. A thin squeal bled through the metal lid. The noise wasn't loud. That made it worse. It sounded like a kettle beginning to boil, then like a chair dragged gently across a tile floor, then like a human breath forced through teeth. Denial came fast because denial always comes fast when the alternative is impossible. A seam of sweat opened under my arms even though the air was below freezing, and the little hairs on my wrists stood up. The logical part of me tried to map it. Vibration, loose lid, bad seal, ice cracking. The urn shook again. The squeal turned into a syllable. My thumb pressed transmit before I could stop it. "This is patrol. Marker isn't red." Silence answered. Not radio silence, actual silence. No wind in the tops, no distant creak, no insects. Even my breath felt muffled, like somebody had pulled a blanket over my face. The blue rectangle sat in my cone of light with wet shine on the edges. A drip had run down the left side and dried into a tiny hook shape. Beneath it, it was barely visible unless the beam hit at an angle. A little sticker clung to the post, like a barcode, smudged with dirt. I didn't think about it then. I just stared. Because my brain wanted the world to snap back to the version where a marker is a marker. The silence waited. The radio crackled again, softer now. "Confirm you've reached the reroute," the voice repeated, but the last word dragged like it got caught on something. The laminated card in my pocket felt heavier, as if the coffee ring had turned to lead. The official instruction was clear, and the moment I followed it, everything got worse, because the system had already decided to talk to me first. A bootstep sounded behind me on the trail. Relief tried to rise. A coworker would explain it. A supervisor would laugh. A hiker would apologize. The step came again, too slow, like someone copying the idea of walking from memory. Headlamp beams swung without permission, because fear has reflexes that training can't erase. The trail behind me was empty. Snow lay smooth except for my own prints, and those prints looked wrong in the light, because they were deeper than they should have been, as if the ground had softened under my weight only. The urn squealed again. This time it sounded like my father trying to clear his throat. My stomach tightened so hard it hurt, and the shame hit with it, sharp and immediate, because the first thought wasn't help him. It was, this is going to get me fired. A habit from my old job in building security kicked in, the kind of habit that kept me alive when elevators stalled and alarms lied. I counted exits, trail back, trail forward, side spur that dropped to the creek. I checked my flashlight, battery indicator, even though my headlamp was still bright. I tapped the radio once and listened for the tiny feedback whine that meant the mic was live. Nothing, no whine, no static. The radio was on, but the forest had swallowed the sound. Telling this now costs me more than a job. The district has an NDA clause buried in the seasonal contract, and the penalty number is printed in a place nobody reads until it's too late. That number keeps waking me up even after all of this, because it sits in my head like a countdown. Walking away should have been easy. Grief made me stupid in small ways that looked like competence from the outside. I told myself I was doing my duty, because duty sounds better than obsession. The blue marker pointed left, where the red markers had always stayed straight. The old map had called that left spur Haitsuru closed after the storm 3 years ago, but the district started using words like reroute when they wanted the public to forget the difference between safety and convenience. The urn squealed once more, then went quiet. That quiet felt like a decision made without me. The blue spur waited. A second rule medium showed up 5 steps in, and that's how I know it wasn't random vandalism. Someone had planned the experience. On the back of the next red marker post, hidden from the main trail, a handwritten note had been taped under clear packing tape. The paper was wrinkled from moisture and the pencil had smeared, so the first word was almost gone, but the message still cut through. Don't follow blue. Don't trust office. The last 2 words were half erased where a thumb had rubbed them, like somebody couldn't decide whether warning me was mercy or betrayal. My chest tightened for a different reason then. Ray came to mind because Ray was the only other seasonal ranger on nights this week, and Ray had been trading shifts with me to cover an adult parent's dialysis rides. Ray never wrote like that. Ray also never broke rules unless someone needed help. The radio stayed dead, but my phone still had enough signal to pull 1 bar near the ridge, and I used it like a lifeline without admitting it. The district's trail cam system was tied into an app that logged motion at the trailheads. Because the district trusted sensors more than people, login spinner turned, the screen loaded. Trailhead camera feed showed the gate, empty, snow unbroken, my truck sitting alone under the sodium light. In the bottom corner, the timestamp read 3:14 a.m. Tuesday. The same minute I was standing under a cedar half a mile away. My throat tightened around a sound that wanted to be a laugh. It came out as a cough instead, dry and rough. My hands shook enough that the phone almost slipped. And the human part of me hissed a dumb little prayer without religion, because brains reach for whatever used to work. The app updated again. A motion alert popped up for the closed spur I was now on, the one the public wasn't supposed to access. The thumbnail image loaded slow, then sharpened. A figure stood near the next marker, half in shadow, half washed out by infrared. The shoulders were too square. The legs were too straight. The posture looked like a person trying to remember what fatigue does. The worst part was the trail behind it, because the snow showed no prints, leading in or out. My beam snapped up, because my eyes still believed what the screen showed. The marker ahead was red as expected, and the trail beyond it was empty. A tiny vibration ran through the phone. The thumbnail refreshed. The figure moved 1 inch to the left, like a framed glitch, and then it was gone. That was Tier 1 proof, the kind that can live in a report. It was also the kind of proof that makes a person act without thinking. If Ray was out here, if Ray had seen a blue marker and followed it because the office asked, then leaving would be a betrayal dressed up as compliance. The district loved using safety as a word that meant quiet. My mouth went dry. The urn sat still against my chest. Too still. The laminated card's plastic edge cut into my finger when I pulled it out. The coffee ring had blurred part of one sentence, and the blur mattered now, because the smeared word could have been only, or it could have been until. The card said, if the urn makes sound past the blue marker, you keep the lid closed until, and the rest disappeared under the stain. A missing line can be a trap. That's the kind of detail people roll their eyes at until they're the ones standing in the woods with a screaming urn. The next red marker was scuffed, like someone had scraped it with a blade. Fresh wood showed through the paint. Below the scuff, a neat rectangle of adhesive residue sat where a sticker had been peeled away. My stomach sank in a slow, sick way, because evidence of tampering meant either vandalism or an official change being covered up. Both options made me responsible, because my job title included the word compliance, and the district treated that word like a chain. Movement flickered at the edge of my beam. Not a body, a shape. Ash leaked from under the urn lid in a thin line, like smoke finding a crack. It didn't fall. It lifted, curling toward the red marker ahead as if it recognized it. A whisper pushed against my eardrum. Not a voice in the air. Something inside my head, timed to the slow lift of the ash. Stay on red. I said it back without meaning to, because repetition comforts the brain. Stay on red. The ash paused, then snapped toward the blue spur again, more insistent, like it was dragging on a leash. Fear turned into anger, because anger is easier to hold. I tightened the urn against my chest until the metal bit. No, I whispered, and the word came out childish. My phone buzzed again. Another motion alert. This time it was from the ridge camera near the old fire tower, the abandoned one the district kept fenced off because the stairs weren't up to code. The thumbnail showed a light moving inside the tower. My light. That made no sense, and the fact that it didn't make sense made it feel like the system was laughing without sound. The app didn't just track motion. It logged badge pings from the access gate at the tower fence. A line of text under the alert read, "Access granted." My badge was still clipped to my jacket. I could feel it tapping my zipper with each breath. The options narrowed into a tight little box, the way they do right before panic. Either the app was wrong, and wrong meant malfunction or sabotage, or the system was recording something that looked like me. The theory bait tried to form. Ray had my spare badge. Ray swapped shifts. Ray could be out here. Ray could be trying to fix something quietly. My gut rejected it. Ray would have called. Ray would have left a voice message full of swears and practical details. An email notification slid across my phone screen because the district system loved timing. The subject line preview showed just enough before my thumb covered it. Reroute directive, Rev. The rest cut off. When I tapped it, the email opened to a blank page, like the message had never existed. The inbox refreshed. The notification vanished. My heart thudded hard enough to shake my collar. A chain of custody hint delivered like a joke. Forwarded messages don't vanish unless someone with access wants them gone. A competence win would have been turning around and marking this as unsafe. It would have been hiking back to the truck, calling in through the landline, filing a report that would get buried in a folder named Review. The urn thumped again. A sound slipped out of it, soft and wet, like somebody's lips peeling apart. "Help," it whispered. That wasn't my father's voice. It didn't have any of his habits in it. It didn't have his impatience. It didn't have his laugh. It sounded like someone who had listened to a lot of humans asking for help and learned how to shape the syllable. My skin went cold in a way the temperature couldn't explain. The moral thing would have been to retreat and call for backup, but the district didn't send backup on nights unless there was blood. And blood wasn't allowed in reports. The pro-social thing, the duty thing, the thing I could live with was finding Ray if Ray was out here. I broke the rule in the only way that felt like responsibility. Boots turned onto the blue spur. The paint smell thickened immediately, and the ash line under the urn lid stretched toward the blue like a needle finding a magnet. A second laminated instruction card had been zip-tied to the first blue marker. Newer plastic. No coffee stain. Clean font. The top edge was nicked like someone had tried to cut it off and failed. It said, "If you find an unauthorized marker, you scrape a sample and bag it for evidence. You do not touch the paint with bare skin." That sounded safe. That sounded like training. That was the trap rule. The evidence bag zip-tied beneath it looked unused, pristine, waiting. My hand hovered anyway because the system had taught me that evidence kept a person safe. Evidence got believed. Evidence kept a job. The ash inside the urn moved again, swirling at the seam like it wanted out. The whisper returned, low and eager. "Do it." A micro-failure happened, small and humiliating. The blade tool slipped from my glove, clattering against the marker post, and the metal sound rang too far in the dead air. The moment the blade hit, the silence broke, not with wind, with a thin electronic chirp that came from nowhere and everywhere, like the forest had a speaker hidden under the leaves. The chirp repeated 3 times, evenly spaced. My badge reader at the trailhead used that sound when it accepted a swipe. I looked down. My badge light blinked green. My badge had just been accepted by something that wasn't a gate. Resource loss hit fast, the first real cost of breaking the rule. The phone signal dropped to 0 bars. The app froze. The screen dimmed, as if the battery had drained in a single gulp, and then the phone restarted without prompting. The wood smelled like hot plastic for 1 second, then the paint smell returned stronger. The blade lay in the snow at the base of the marker, half buried. My glove hovered over it. Picking it up meant touching the post again, and touching the post felt like signing my name to something I hadn't read. The urn squealed. The sound wasn't kettle or chair anymore. It was a human scream, squeezed down into a narrow pipe. My body reacted before my brain could argue. I clamped my arms around the urn and stumbled forward, away from the blue marker, because motion felt safer than thought. Blue markers started appearing more often. That alone proved planning, because vandalism doesn't keep perfect spacing. Blue markers marched through the trees in a neat, confident rhythm, always visible from the last one, like someone had designed a corridor. Red markers stayed on the main trail to my right, and I could see them through the branches, steady and reassuring. Staying on red would have gotten me back to the truck. Staying on red would have kept me employed. Staying on red would have meant leaving Ray out here. A bad choice can feel like love in the moment. That's what I keep turning over. Ahead, a glint of reflective tape flashed low to the ground. Not a marker. Something dropped. A district-issued radio lay face down in the snow, the kind Ray carried. The antenna was snapped halfway up like someone had bent it hard. My throat tightened. I crouched, and my knee sank deeper than it should have, because the snow had drifted around it in a little mound, like the forest had tried to bury it. The radio's screen was cracked, but the last channel number still showed faintly, and a strip of tape across the back had Ray's initials in black ink. My fingers hovered over it. Touching a co-worker's lost radio meant reporting it. Reporting it meant questions. Questions meant my probation review turning into something else. My hands took it anyway, because some rules are human and some rules are just paper. A voice burst from the cracked speaker, sudden and too loud, and I flinched hard enough to bite my tongue. "Patrol," Ray said, breathless and thin, like the radio had recorded it. "Don't listen to the office, don't—" The message cut off, not with static, with a soft click like a recording stopped. The woods went silent again, but this time my own blood rushing filled the gap. I swallowed hard. My tongue tasted like copper, and I hated that my brain tried to make it poetic. Copper meant injury. Copper meant consequence. Copper meant I'd already paid something. Ray was out here. Ray was close enough to drop a radio. Ray had tried to warn. I moved faster, but no chase happened. The forest didn't need to run me down. It just needed to keep me walking. A clearing opened ahead, like somebody had cut it clean. Trees stopped in a circle, their trunks scarred with old blaze marks that had been repainted so many times the bark looked swollen. In the center, a stone fire ring sat cold and perfect. Too perfect, like nobody had ever used it for warmth. Blue markers ringed the clearing, evenly spaced, facing inward as if they were watching. A metal stake stood in the fire ring with a loop at the top. A scatter permit sign should have been here. Instead, a small plaque had been bolted to the stake, and the plaque reflected my light back at me with a dull sheen. The plaque was stamped with the same revision code that had been on the laminated card's corner. That little gray print nobody reads, unless they're desperate to keep a job. The urn thumped once, then twice. The lid began to vibrate. My lungs refused to fill for a second. A thought tried to be logical. Pressure change, temperature, bad seal. Another thought cut it off, sharper. Something inside wants out. The ash line at the seam thickened. A swirl rose like smoke and then didn't behave like smoke. It held shape. It curved against the air. It moved with intention. A scream poured out of the urn, full volume now, not muffled, not squeezed down. It sounded like a person being forced to inhale ash. It sounded like a throat filling and fighting. My knees threatened to buckle, and the shame hit again, because my first reflex was to cover the urn like it was a mouth saying something illegal. The scream stopped. The ash rose in a column. A human outline began to form in the center of the clearing, and the outline wasn't my father. It was a composite. It had the posture from the trail cam thumbnail and the shoulders from the tower alert, and the wrong straight legs that didn't show fatigue. A face tried to appear and failed, like Ash couldn't decide which features belonged. The voice came from everywhere at once, not through the urn now, but through the clearing like the air had learned speech. "Permit," it said, and the word landed heavy. My hand went to my chest pocket automatically. The habit of compliance is a muscle, and that muscle fired even when the brain screamed no. The permit paper crinkled under my fingers. I pulled it out and my light hit the stamp. 12B. Approved. My signature, my name in cheap ink. The ash figure leaned toward the paper, not gliding, not floating, leaning like it understood joints and gravity, but didn't quite obey them. The thought hit like a cold slap. This wasn't about a forest spirit. This was about paperwork. This was about permission. This was about a system that could turn grief into a document. The plaque on the stake caught my light again, and for a second I saw the faintest etched line on it, a sentence so shallow it only showed at one angle. The sentence read, "If you complete the scatter, you complete the transfer." I didn't notice it then. My eyes were locked on the ash figure's hands because the hands were wrong. It had 6 fingers on the left. The ash figure lifted one hand toward me, palm open, like it was asking for the permit, like it was asking to be let in. The radio in my hand clicked. Ray's recorded voice didn't play. Instead, a live voice came through, flat and calm, the voice from earlier. "Good, patrol reached the site," it said. "Proceed." Anger flared so hard it steadied me. "Who is this?" I snapped, and the words tasted like blood. A pause and then a name that made my stomach turn, because it was familiar in the way HR memos are familiar. The supervisor who signed my seasonal contract. The one who used the word opportunity when he meant risk. "Patrol," he said again, refusing to answer the question. "This reroute has been approved. Complete the task and return. Do not engage with unauthorized warnings." Unauthorized warnings. The handwritten note on the marker back flashed in my mind. Don't trust office. 2 hypotheses lined up, ugly and plausible. 1. This was sabotage, an internal test to flush out rule breakers, a sick compliance drill designed to protect budgets and careers. 2. Something not human was using the system as a mouth, and the office had decided feeding it was safer than fighting it. My brain chose the first one because humans are easier to hate than ghosts. If this was a test, it could be beaten with evidence. I did what the district trained me to do when something got complicated. I tried to document. Phone came up, camera mode, even though the battery icon blinked low. I aimed at the ash figure and hit record. The screen showed the clearing, the blue markers, the stake. The ash figure didn't appear. The camera showed empty air where the ash stood. My stomach dropped. The live world showed a shape. The camera showed nothing. That meant either hallucination or a medium-specific presence, something that existed only outside capture. I swung the phone toward the blue markers. The camera showed them crisp and bright. A compromise. The thing didn't like being recorded, or the system didn't allow it. I lifted the phone again and pointed at the plaque, because the plaque was physical. The words on it showed on screen, but they blurred the moment my focus locked, like the lens refused to resolve them. The radio voice came again, firmer now. "Complete the scatter. Return on red. This is a direct order." Return unread. That phrase hooked into the echo in my head. Stay on red. The ash figure leaned closer. A low hum began in the clearing. Not wind, not insects. A machine hum like a server room far away. A reward beat hit then, small and brutal. My competence had found the system. The horror was the system. The urn in my arms went hot, sudden heat that seeped through metal into my forearms. Pain flared. I almost dropped it. The smeared line on the laminated card came back to me. That missing word hidden under coffee. Keep the lid closed until what? Until the sound stops? Until the transfer completes? I had to make a choice with consequences either way, and the choice didn't feel heroic. It felt like picking which hand to burn. My eyes fell on the stone fire ring. Cold stones, a metal stake, a loop. Containment training came up from somewhere old, and fire ring as boundary, loop as anchor point, ash as particulate. I pulled the duct tape from my pack with shaking fingers, because I always carried it for trail repairs. I wrapped it around the urn seam hard, layering it until the lid couldn't flex. The tape hissed as it stuck, and the sound felt loud in the humming air. The ash figure's head jerked. The hum deepened. My arms ached. The urn thrashed once like something inside slammed against the metal. I did a stupid, brave thing that I can justify only because Ray was out here, and because my father deserved better than being used as bait. I hooked the urn's handle through the loop on the stake and clipped my carabiner through it, anchoring it to the center of the fire ring. Then I stepped back. The ash figure surged forward, and the surge looked like a person lunging, except it didn't cross the fire ring stones. It hit an invisible edge and splashed like water against glass. Ash sprayed outward. The blue markers around the clearing flickered in my headlamp beam, their reflective tape flashing like eyes. The urn screamed again, but the scream stayed trapped, muffled under tape, ugly and furious. Containment partially worked. That was the win. The cost came instantly. The headlamp dimmed as if the batteries had been siphoned, and the beam narrowed until it felt like staring through a straw. The cold bit hard against my face, and I realized my breath was smoking more than it should. Temperature dropped in the clearing in a way no weather report would explain. The radio hissed back to life. Not my channel. A recorded training voice, cheerful and wrong, filled the speaker. Remember, it said, if you encounter an anomaly, you do not deviate from approved pathing. Approved pathing. The voice repeated, and on the third repeat it changed. The cheerful tone cracked, and underneath it something else spoke, low and intimate, like it knew my name without saying it. Sign, it whispered. The permit paper trembled in my hand. My signature sat on it, ordinary, embarrassing. The ash figure pressed itself against the invisible boundary again, and this time its fingers elongated, reaching between stones, probing for gaps like smoke, finding a crack. A new sound began behind me, and it wasn't wind. It wasn't an animal. It was the slow, deliberate turning of a paper page, the rasp of pulp against pulp, like someone leafing through a binder in the dark. That sound didn't belong in the woods. My skin prickled. I spun, beam swinging over the tree line, and saw nothing but trunks and shadow. The page-turn sound continued, steady, patient, like a person reviewing instructions. The radio spoke again, the supervisor's voice returning with a colder edge. Patrol, confirm completion. The forest didn't want confirmation. The office did. Ray's radio in my hand clicked once, and a new message played, quieter than before. Found the real binder tab, Ray whispered. It's missing for a reason, don't... The message dissolved into a hiss. My stomach twisted. Missing binder tab. That meant Ray had been in the station. Ray had seen something in the paperwork. Ray had come out here anyway. A stakes line landed in my head, blunt and immediate. If I walked out now without Ray, the office would call it abandonment, and my badge would lock before I reached the truck. My light swept the ground and caught a scuff mark. Leading out of the clearing, a dragged line in the snow, too straight to be a boot print. It led toward a stand of trees where the blue markers thickened like teeth. A second document medium waited there, because the system loves layering instructions. A plastic sleeve hung from a branch, by zip tie, the kind used to protect notices from rain. Inside was a printed memo page with toner so faded it looked gray. No header line, no official seal, but the language was pure office. It referenced Rev R3 in the middle of a sentence like it was nothing, and it used the phrase remains reclamation, like it was a normal task. The memo included one quoted instruction, and it made my stomach crawl. In the event of unauthorized dispersal, you will guide the subject to the reclamation clearing via blue markers. You will ensure permit contact. You will not attempt containment beyond approved boundary. A human hand had written on the bottom margin in pen, small and furious, smudged by moisture. Blue is not a reroute. Blue is a mouth. That handwriting looked like Ray's. My throat tightened so hard it hurt. Ray had found this. Ray had written this. Ray had come out here with that knowledge, and Ray had still gotten trapped. A moral dilemma opened like a split trail. Option 1, cut losses, abandon the clearing, hike back on red, call state search and rescue through official channels, pretend ignorance, keep my job long enough to survive my lease renewal window. Option 2, follow the dragged line into the blue corridor, find Ray, risk completing the permit contact the memo demanded, and accept that the office might be feeding someone to something. Neither choice was clean. Both choices left a footprint. My chest ached with a grief that wasn't only my father. Ray had an adult parent waiting for a ride in the morning. Ray had trusted me to swap shifts. Ray had trusted the office less than me, and that trust was a weight. I grabbed the memo, folded it tight, and shoved it into my pocket, where the probation letter sat. Paper against paper, two kinds of threat. Then I did the only thing that let me keep breathing. I stepped into the blue corridor. The page turn sound followed closer now, like someone walking behind me with a binder open, reading as they moved. The forest stayed unnaturally quiet except for that, and the absence of wind felt like pressure on my ears. A trail cam on a nearby tree blinked a tiny red LED. It had been installed by the district last month, because funding loves surveillance. I lifted my phone, even though it was half dead, and pointed it at the cam. The live preview on the phone showed the cam's own little screen reflected in its casing, and in that reflection a shape stood behind me. Too close, head tilted, shoulders too square. I spun so fast my ankle rolled and pain flared. Empty woods stared back. The phone screen still showed the shape in the reflection for one heartbeat longer than it should. Then the image smeared and froze. Tier 2 proof. Medium specific. Decision forcing. I forced my breath down. Ray, I said into the dead air, and the name sounded like a curse. A faint reply came from ahead, not a voice, a rhythm. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps. The same pattern my fingers used when I knocked on Ray's office door at the station, a habit Ray joked about copying from old union guys. I followed the taps. The blue corridor opened into a smaller clearing where the ground dipped. A depression held old leaves, and the smell here was different, not paint. Dry, dusty, like an attic. Ray lay on the far side, half sitting against a log, headlamp off, face pale in my narrow beam. Ray's gloves were gone, hands wrapped in tape like bandages. Ray's eyes found mine and flinched, as if eye contact itself was risky. "Stay back," Ray rasped, voice raw. "Don't bring the urn closer." Relief hit so hard it almost made me cry. My throat tightened and burned. I kept distance because Ray asked, because Ray's voice sounded like someone who had learned a rule the hard way. "What happened?" I asked, and the question tasted like guilt. Ray laughed once, humorless. "The office happened." Ray's gaze flicked to my chest where the urn strap crossed. "It wants that permit, that's all it wants." My hands trembled. Saw a memo. Remains reclamation, blue markers. Ray's eyes widened a fraction, then narrowed. "So the memo didn't vanish for everybody," Ray said, and that line landed like a knife. Means it picked its target. A tiny movement caught my beam near Ray's boot. Ash, not from my urn. A little drift of gray dust sat on the snow like someone had shaken out a pocket. Ray followed my stare and swallowed hard. "Don't breathe that," Ray whispered. "Don't touch it. It climbs." That sounded insane. It also sounded like a person describing a real hazard. Ray's taped hands were proof. A new reward beat hit. Irreversible evidence. Ray's tape wasn't for injury. It was for barrier. Ray's head tilted, listening. "Hear that?" Ray asked. The page turn sound had stopped. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It felt attentive. Ray's eyes went unfocused for a second, and fear ran through me. Ray's mouth moved as if forming a word, but no sound came out. Then a whisper slipped from Ray's throat in a voice that wasn't Ray's. "Permit," it breathed. My stomach lurched. Ray jerked as if yanked by a hook inside. "No," Ray snapped, voice returning, and Ray slapped a taped hand over their own mouth, pressing hard. The tape made a ripping sound as Ray's fingers flexed. Underneath, skin looked gray with fine powder stuck to it, like ash had embedded. Ray's eyes watered. "It got in," Ray said, and shame colored the words. "Just a little. I scraped the marker like the card said. I thought evidence would save." Trap rule proven. My jaw clenched. "So the office planned it," I said, anger rising to hold me up. "They set the markers." Ray's gaze slid away. "Not just set," Ray whispered. "They track. They grade. They guide." Ray nodded toward my chest. "That earns the bait. A permit makes it legal. Legal makes it hungry." The idea turned my stomach, but it clicked with the plaque sentence, with the memo language, with the way the radio had demanded confirmation. Adult anxiety turned into horror in one clean line. Policy as a mouth. A plan formed because my brain can't live without a plan. "Containment ring worked," I said. "Fire ring boundary it can't cross." Ray's eyes tightened. "It can't cross stones," Ray corrected. "Not unless it's carrying permission." My breath caught. Permission, permit, signature. The system wasn't supernatural first. It was transactional. I looked down at the permit in my pocket and felt nauseated. My signature sat there like a key. "It didn't register until later," I said quietly, because the thought finally surfaced, sharp and undeniable. The revision code on the laminated card, the same code on the plaque, the memo's Rev R3. This wasn't vandalism. This was an approved release. Ray watched my face and nodded once, grim. "R3 means third revision," Ray said. "Third time they tried to make it work without losing staff." A cold line of dread slid through me. Third time meant prior times, prior incidents, other clearings, other markers. A stake reminder punched in, practical and cruel. My probation review was hours away, and the badge auto-lock didn't care if the forest was eating people. Ray's taped hand lifted and pointed weakly toward a tree behind me. A red marker post stood there, ordinary. Someone had carved words into its back, deep enough to catch shadow. "Stay on red," it read. Ray's eyes glistened. "But that's not comfort," Ray whispered. "That's a leash." The inversion hit then, ugly and clean. Following the red markers wasn't safety. Following red was obedience, and obedience was what fed the system. My stomach turned. "So blue is where it can't pretend," Ray cut in. "Blue is where it shows what the office does." A theory bait tried to rise. Maybe Ray was hallucinating from stress. Maybe Ash was just Ash. Maybe the office was running a psych test to weed out weak hires. The evidence kept killing the theory. The vanishing email, the impossible timestamp, the badge green light in the woods, the plaque sentence. Ray's breath hitched. "It's coming," Ray whispered. The page turn sound returned, closer than before, but no binder existed. The sound came from the trees, from the air, from behind the eyes. My headlamp flickered once. Then all sound stopped again, even the page turn, like somebody had hit mute on the world. Ray's lips moved under the taped hand. No voice. Only a faint hiss escaped. Not from Ray's lungs, but from somewhere deeper, like ash shifting. In that absolute quiet, my own heartbeat sounded like footsteps. The silence forced a decision, because silence always does. If the thing could take Ray's voice, then waiting meant losing Ray. If moving meant dragging Ray into the corridor, then moving meant bringing a contaminated person closer to my urn, and that meant permit contact risk. A plan took shape anyway. Containment ladder. Cost accepted. I pulled my last evidence bag from my pack, the one that had been zip-tied to the trap rule card but not used. I held it open with shaking fingers and slid it toward Ray's taped hands. Ray understood without talking. Ray shoved the crumpled memo page into it, then the peeled sticker Ray had pocketed, then a torn strip of laminated plastic with the faded Rev R3 print. Hard proof. Ray's eyes locked on mine. Ray mouthed 2 words under the tape. "Burn it." The idea made my gut clench, because burning evidence is the kind of thing people do when they're guilty. Burning evidence is also the kind of thing people do when the evidence is the infection. A selfish motive flared, ugly. If I burned it, nobody could prove I'd ever seen it. If I burned it, my probation review might stay clean. That thought sickened me, and the sickness sharpened into resolve, because I couldn't stand the kind of person who would protect a job over a human being. "I'm not burning Ray's warning," I whispered, and the vow steadied my hands. I did the opposite. I used the phone's last breath to photograph the sticker and the memo, close enough that the Rev R3 code filled the screen. The battery dropped to 1%. The phone trembled in my hand like it was cold. Then I shoved the phone into the evidence bag with the paper and sealed it, because I'd seen files vanish and I trusted plastic more than systems. Ray's eyes widened with something like gratitude and terror mixed. "Upload," Ray rasped under the tape. "It moves if it can't delete." The world snapped back into sound. The page turn noise slammed into my ears, loud now, frantic, like someone flipping pages fast. Branches creaked. Blue markers glinted between trunks, closer than they should have been. A shadow moved without feet. Ray tried to stand and failed, legs shaking. A competence win demanded a cost. I unclipped my badge from my jacket and pressed it into Ray's taped hand. Ray stared, confused. "Gate will read 1 badge," I said, voice tight. "Mine already got accepted by something. That makes me the key it wants." Ray's eyes filled. "No," Ray whispered, and the word came out like a plea. I shook my head once, hard, because softness would break me. "If the gate locks, Ray gets stranded," I said, and the sentence was both strategy and confession. "Badge goes with Ray. Resource loss. Access." My chest felt suddenly lighter and more exposed, as if I'd removed a piece of armor. The forest didn't care about symbols, but the system did, and the system had teeth. I grabbed Ray under the arm and hauled Ray upright, because Ray couldn't walk alone. Ray's body felt too cold through the jacket, and that cold made my stomach twist. We moved. Blue markers slid past in a controlled rhythm, and the corridor tightened, forcing us single file. My headlamp beam narrowed again until it barely covered the next marker. A shadow appeared ahead, cropped by trunk and beam. Not full body, a shoulder, a hand. The hand lifted and pressed against a tree, and the fingers left gray prints. 6 prints. Ray made a sound under the tape. Half sob, half growl. The shadow's head tilted. No face. Only a suggestion. Like ash, held in place by intention. Tier 3 arrived without spectacle. The figure stepped into my beam and froze like a still frame. Its outline matched a human except for 2 things. The joints bent the wrong way at the elbows, and the chest rose and fell like it was breathing, but no air moved. Ash trickled from its collar like dandruff. A permit paper, folded and dirty, was pinned to its sternum with a rusty staple. My permit stamp number flashed on it. My stomach dropped. That meant a copy existed. That meant the system had already duplicated my signature before this night. The figure lifted a hand and pointed past us toward the main trail where red markers waited steady and bright through the branches. Then it spoke, and this time the voice came through my own throat without my consent. "Stay on red." Ray jerked hard against my grip, fear burning in Ray's eyes. I bit down on my tongue until pain grounded me. The copper taste flooded again. The figure watched, patient, like a policy waiting for compliance. A decision beat slammed into place. Red markers meant obedience. Blue markers meant truth. Ray needed safety. Ray also needed the office exposed, because safety without truth would only feed this again. My hands tightened around Ray's arm. "Trailhead," I forced out, words thick, and I leaned into Ray, guiding Ray toward the red markers despite everything in me screaming. "Get to the truck. Get the evidence uploaded." Ray shook their head, frantic. I had to make it sound like a professional call, because Ray trusted professional calls. "Ray takes the badge," I said, and the phrasing steadied Ray, because habits are anchors. "Ray gets the proof off grid." Ray's eyes held mine, and in them I saw the moral split, leaving me versus losing the chance to stop this. Ray's taped hand pressed hard against my sleeve, a silent apology. Ray turned and half ran, half stumbled toward the red trail, clutching the evidence bag to their chest, like it was a heart. The figure didn't chase Ray. It watched Ray go, then turned its attention to me with calm patience. My radio, which had been dead, crackled to life on my shoulder like it had been waiting. The supervisor's voice slid through, smooth now. "Patrol excellent," he said. "Return on red and we can discuss your review." My jaw clenched. "Ray is injured," I said, and the line came out sharp with anger. "Send help." A pause. Then the voice, colder. "Patrol, Ray is not authorized to possess evidence. Return immediately." Authority betrayal made itself undeniable. The office didn't care about Ray. The office cared about control. My throat tightened. "The reroute wasn't approved," I snapped. "That memo said remains reclamation." Another pause, and then a soft sound through the radio that wasn't static. A tiny page turn. "Patrol," the voice said, no longer quite human. "Complete the transfer." The figure stepped closer. Ash drifted from its sleeves and settled on the snow without making sound. The air around it felt dry, like a furnace. The thought came, clean and final. The only reason it hadn't crossed the stone boundary at the clearing was because it had been waiting for permission in a form it could carry. It carried my stamp now. It carried my number. My hands went to my pocket and pulled out the permit because my body still believed in documents. A stupid impulse flared. Tear it up. Destroy it. Make it impossible. I tore it once, hard, down the middle. The paper resisted because that's what cheap permit paper does. The tear went jagged, uneven. The stamp split, but the ink stayed. The figure tilted its head. The radio voice chuckled, quiet. "That doesn't revoke," it murmured. A chill ran through me. Of course. The system never let anyone revoke. My headlamp flickered again, then steadied. The battery indicator blinked empty, but the light stayed on, bright and constant. That wasn't a win. That was the forest keeping me lit. False resolution tried to happen then, cruelly. The red trail ahead looked clear. The truck waited somewhere beyond. The office voice promised discussion. The figure didn't rush. Everything felt briefly like it might return to normal if I just walked where told. Relief almost slid into my bones. Then I heard faintly my own call sign coming from the woods behind me, spoken in my voice, flat and calm. "Patrol unit, confirm you've reached the reroute." The system didn't need me to go back. The system had learned how to talk without me. The real rule clicked into place with a cold finality. Leaving didn't end it. Leaving spread it. I turned and ran back toward the clearing, not for heroism, not for closure, but because containment was the only form of mercy left. Blue markers guided me like a corridor again, but this time they appeared ahead before I reached them, flickering into existence in my beam, like a printer spitting out signs. The paint smell returned, stronger, and the solvent sting made my eyes water. When I hit the clearing, the fire ring was broken. Stones had been kicked outward as if something heavy had stepped through without caring. The urn still hung from the stake by my carabiner, but the duct tape had been peeled back in neat strips, carefully, like fingers had done it. The lid sat open. The inside of the urn was empty. My lungs seized. My chest felt hollow in a way grief can't explain. A thin gray trail led from the urn across the snow, a streak, like someone had dragged a charcoal finger. It pointed toward the red trail, toward Ray. A desperate, ugly sound left my throat. Not a scream, a laugh bark that held panic in its teeth. "No," I hissed, and the word felt small. A last chance remained, not at saving myself, but at keeping the thing from wearing my signature like skin. The plaque on the stake caught my light again. This time, with my beam angled low, the etched sentence showed clearly, and another line beneath it became visible, hidden until the right angle. If transfer completes, the office is absolved. Absolved. The word sat like rot. The system wasn't feeding it for survival. The system was feeding it for liability. I shoved my glove into the fire ring stones and grabbed the coldest one. Pain shot up my arm. I slammed the stone down on the plaque until metal dented and the bolt loosened. The plaque popped free and fell into the snow with a dull thunk. The radio hissed. The supervisor voice didn't speak now. A new voice did, soft and pleased. "Signed," it whispered. My own lips moved without permission. "Signed," they echoed. Horror turned into pure practical urgency. I grabbed the plaque, ran to the closest blue marker, and scraped the plaque edge against the wet blue paint, smearing it. ruining its clean reflection. The paint stuck to the plaque like tar. For one heartbeat, the air in the clearing shivered. The blue markers around the circle flickered, and the hum deepened into a groan. The competence win cost me time. It also bought Ray seconds. I bolted onto the red trail because red was where Ray had gone, and because red was now the battlefield, the place the system assumed was safe. Halfway down, my headlamp beam caught movement in the branches above. Not a body, a swirl. Ash drifted overhead like a living fog, flowing against wind that didn't exist. A voice whispered from it, not human, not office, something between permit. My breath hitched. I forced my lungs to take shallow sips because Ray had warned about breathing it. I pulled my shirt collar up over my mouth, even though it did almost nothing. The trailhead gate appeared ahead, and in that moment I saw Ray's truck door open, interior light on. Ray stood by the driver's seat, shaking, tapping at a phone that wouldn't cooperate. The evidence bag sat on the hood, and Ray's taped hands hovered over it like Ray was afraid to touch the plastic. A sound came from the dark behind Ray, soft and affectionate. My call sign, spoken in my voice. Ray froze. I shouted Ray's name, and the shout tore my throat raw. Ray snapped toward me, eyes wide with terror and relief. Behind Ray, a figure stepped into the sodium light cast by the gate. It looked like a person in a district jacket. It looked like me from 20 feet away. Then it turned its head, and the joints in its neck rotated too far, too smooth, like it was made of ash, pretending it bone. Ray stumbled back against the truck. Ray's taped hand flew to the evidence bag, and Ray yanked it close like a shield. The figure lifted a hand and pointed at the bag. "Return," it said. And this time, it used the supervisor's voice perfectly. Ray's eyes met mine, and the choice landed again, even sharper. Protect the proof or protect the person. I ran straight at Ray and shoved Ray into the driver's seat, hard enough to bruise, because gentleness would have taken too long. "Drive," I snapped, and the word was both order and plea. Ray's hands fumbled, taped fingers slipping on the steering wheel. Ray's breath came fast, panicked. The figure stepped closer, arm extending toward the open door, six-finger hand reaching for the evidence bag. I slammed the truck door shut between them. Metal rang. The figure's hand hit the glass and left 6 gray prints that smoked faintly, like the glass was reacting. Ray stared at the prints, horror widening Ray's eyes. "Go!" I shouted again, and Ray obeyed, because Ray was trained to obey urgent commands and because Ray was still human. The engine turned over. Tires spun on snow. The truck lurched forward through the gate, and the evidence bag slid onto the passenger seat. Safe for the moment, the figure didn't chase. It watched Ray's taillights fade and then turned its head toward me with a calm I will never forget. My radio crackled one last time. A quoted line played through. Not as a header, not as a memo, but as if someone had tucked it into my ear like a secret. "If you see the blue stripe again, forward this to any office that still answers." The voice wasn't mine. It wasn't Ray's. It sounded like a third person, someone exhausted. I stood alone in the gate light, hands shaking, heart hammering, and the cold bit deeper than winter. The figure lifted its hand and pressed 2 fingers to my chest where the permit had been, like a clerk checking for a stamp. My mouth opened. The words that came out weren't a scream. They were the clean confession that keeps looping in my head. "I followed the rule," I said, voice flat with dread. "That's what doomed me." The figure tilted its head as if listening, then stepped backward into the dark where the red markers began, and the last thing it left behind was not ash. It was a fresh blue drip on the nearest red marker, shining wet under the gate light like a promise. Stay on red.